We're live. All right.
Somebody else have muted in here? That's Jeff, you're unmuted.
Okay. Back to regular session. Reconvene the work session. Next item on the agenda is number 3. Discussion of the 2017 NEC and 2018 IBC for building codes. Is this Chuck or Jack?
Jack.
All right. Jack, you ready?
Yes, I am. If you've had an opportunity to read the staff report, you'll get a little bit of an understanding of where we're at. Just wanted to give you a little bit of background. We adopted the initial ICC, which is the International Code Council family of codes for the first time in 2006, which was the 2003 codes that we adopted. Then about every 3 to 4 years, we try to adopt the new codes that come out, generally waiting for other communities to kind of vet them. But we are currently on the 2012 codes, and we are suggesting that we go to the 2018 codes for a couple of reasons. We're ISO certified as a building code enforcement group. And that benefits our residents from the standpoint of homes built under the adopted code, get a better insurance ISO rating. And those ratings occur every 5 years, and we are due for our rating in November. So to get the full amount of our rating system, part of that requires us to have codes that are no older than 5 years. We're on the 2012 codes, so they are currently obviously 8 years out. We had planned on doing this much earlier in the year, but as we all know, COVID happened and here we are. So the codes were presented to the Planning Commission in the spring, and ultimately it sets us where we're at. Staff, which was Jim Waddle and myself, reviewed the building codes with the assistance of the consultant from IBTS, and kind of made certain recommendations and understandings related to those building codes. And then on the residential code side, which is the primary one we use, obviously we do more residential than anything else. We made contact with the Kansas City Area Home Builders Association, and they regularly provide their input as to the new code provisions, the difficulties with those, cost implications, et cetera. And they provided us with a recommended adoption schedule. Interestingly enough, 98% of everything that they talked about were already things that we had planned on doing in our recommendation anyway. So we meshed up real well. There were a couple of items, small items, where they wanted us to, they recommend that we change the code, and staff recommendation is to not change the code because the interpretation they were afraid would happen in some communities or however was not something that we were going to make. Our interpretation matched where they wanted us to go anyway. So we didn't need to change the code from that standpoint. We have a ton of codes, as you all have seen on chapter 500 of our code section, and it relates to plumbing, mechanical, fuel, gas, residential code, commercial code, energy efficiency. This year we're recommending the swimming pool and spa code because it's been pulled out of the residential code. It used to be a subset of the residential code, but now they have a separate code family for just it. We're recommending we adopt it as well. I think that gives a big picture background. If you have any specific questions, I'll certainly try to answer those.
Well, I actually do hear crickets. Alderman Chevalier.
So if we change the codes now, what happens to the stuff that's already in flight? Does that
It stays.
It stays?
It will be for anything new that comes down the pike. So once it goes into effect, say we started effective November. So any new building permit that comes in, we will use the new code to enforce.
Okay.
And we'll issue permits on it. We'll let everybody know. Everybody knows it's coming already, but let them know that they need to update their plans to the 2018 code and specifically address some of the new provisions that we have suggested to add, which relate to mainly the site maintenance. Those have been issues that we've regularly had complaints about. So we've kind of addressed every issue that we've had regular complaints about, the cleanup of it, the bathroom usage, so that now they have to have a bathroom within 500 feet on the residential side of a project, so that the workers for each contractor and subcontractor have a place to use the restroom instead of out in the field, which often was happening. And then generally how they clean up the site. We've added provisions in the maintenance sections of the residential code. We're not recommending anything really of any significance in any of the other codes, adopting them as we have them currently, just as they're updated.
Alderman Atkins.
I think we need to keep up on all the codes. If we keep getting behind, it could bite us later.
And Alderman Atkins, as I indicated earlier, our intent was to have this done sooner, but
Right.
COVID happened. So
Right.
we are okay. We are okay. And we will, the new code, to be quite frank, will be coming out next year. Usually folks wait a year or so on these codes, but most communities in the Kansas City metro didn't adopt the 2015 codes. They come out every 3 years. They didn't adopt the 2015 code, so they're in the same boat we are. Their 5-year window for the ISO certification is coming due, so they're adopting the 18 version. So
Let's keep up with them.
If there are no objections or complaints, we will have an ordinance that adopts each of those codes available or ready for the next meeting.
Okay, sounds good. Any objections to that?
No.
Thank you. Alderman Sarver.
No objections.
Okay. Alderman Uladall, thanks for joining.
Yeah, I explained my absence.
No problem. Alderman Atkins, you're good. Bunker. Chevalier. Cool. All right, Jack, go for it.
We will have those at the meeting on the 20th.
Cool. Next, property maintenance.
Yep. I'll go through that. Similarly, property maintenance code is another one of the international code families. In 2012, we eliminated most of the old nuisance code scenarios that we used to have, which were based upon state law. We adopted the state law stuff. And we went the proper IPMC, the property maintenance code, for, to be quite frank, a much more robust and clear understanding of what the rules are. They identify with definitions everything related to weed height or maintenance of the exterior area of your property, keeping those things up. And we are now in the same time frame with the property maintenance code that it's time for updating. We decided to break them apart from the building code discussion, because property maintenance is really handled through the code enforcement arm. And we looked at it a little differently. As you, if you read through the staff report, you'll see that we have certain recommendations that we want to throw out and have you all discuss and see where we want to go, particularly on two subjects: the weed height, weed and grass height issue. Currently in our code, it's somewhere between 7 or 16 inches, depending on all kinds of factors. Kiowa has been doing this for many years, and 2 of which are with us. And her recommendation to me was, why don't we have one rule for grass height and make it apply to everyone? From her perspective, she recommends 10 inches in height. Most people are well in advance of that. But 10-inch means that there's a serious issue, and we move on it rather quickly at that point, 17 days afterwards, and we can have it ready for cutting. So she's recommending that we change the changes that we previously made in 2012 to the grass height. And then the other one would be vehicle parking, where it is and the type of it. And as I explained in the property maintenance code, we have abandoned, unlicensed, or inoperable vehicles. We can get those anywhere they are. They can be addressed. But our problem really, and what we're asking for, is some discussion and an understanding where the board would like to see us go as it relates to parking those in grassy areas. If they're not on a paved surface or a gravel surface, we have all kinds of issues to come up. So again, this is recommendation from Kiowa based upon the number and frequency and type of complaints she gets and issues she sees related to vehicles. So if you have any questions or like to discuss that, that would be very beneficial for us on crafting the final language on the ordinance on this one too.
Jack, I appreciate it, and I see that Q is on as well. I'm good with both recommendations. The one thing I do want to ask that we look into also is storage on city streets. We have some vehicles that are parked and we have some vehicles that are stored. If they're there for a long period of time, they haven't moved for a year and a half, and they're not adjacent to their property, or even if they are, it makes it hard for our snowplows to get through, our street sweepers, everybody. So, and it becomes a safety issue too when you're having to go around a giant pontoon on a small street.
Yeah, and I think I discussed it in the staff report. Kiowa does get those complaints regularly, but they are not within her purview. That's a police department matter. And we can certainly bring that up in another forum with getting Chief Lockridge directly involved. His guys would be enforcing that.
Gotcha. Because yeah, one of the other ones I know is the semis parked in city streets that we see quite often. So, Alderman Atkins.
Got a question. If I was to park my truck in my backyard for a day to load up barbecue equipment, I would be in violation?
You would get, if we happen to see it, you would get a notice that you need to to not park it in the grass. And you would correct that violation by moving it. So those itinerant deals likely don't happen. It's when we see or have complaints that they've got 10 cars in the backyard, or they're using their front yard as a parking lot and it's all muddy. Those are the common complaints. Individual bringing it in for just a bit to load something. Effectively, we wouldn't, there would be no direct enforcement. You may get a letter saying, hey, you can't park in the grass.
Yeah, the other thing is when you're parked in the grass, you get the grass that's over 10 inches as well, right? That's usually the double whammy, right?
That's a long-term parking.
Yeah. Yes, it's more of the long-term parking scenario, because if it parks there, the grass grows up around the wheels or wherever the mower can't get, so you get tall grass there. And depending on the circumstances, if they're parked there long enough, it's going to kill everything. Then when you get a good rainstorm, you get mud. And if they're moving the vehicle, or even if they're not, if it's on some kind of a hill, that mud leaves the property. He's dealing with it. If they're parking in the front yard, they got a muddy front yard and they drive over to the street dragging mud everywhere. Those were the concerns that Kiowa has had to deal with primarily in the last 18 months or so. I think the first year she was getting a handle of Smithville. Now she understands the community and where the issues are. And so we're trying to alleviate some of the biggest complaints that we get from our citizens. And these are those two.
I could see maybe adjusting the verbiage on 2 days, 3 days or more parking. But if we only say no parking at all, if my wheels are off 6 inches off my driveway, are you going to get a bunch of complaints?
We may get complaints, but that happens regularly already, and there isn't anything we can really do because they're not really parked. For most properties, the front yard starts from the premises area a foot away from the sidewalk. So if you're parked with your wheel gets into the grass in the area between the sidewalk and your curb, you're still in the city right of way. Now, if it's a long-term parking and you're in grass, we'll likely say, hey, park it in the street or park it in your garage, but don't park it there.
And I agree, and that's common sense. But
yeah, here's the deal, Alderman Atkins. We will get complaints, usually in a scenario where one neighbor's mad at the other, so they come up with 60 complaints, and they're doing this, and they're doing this, and they're doing this. And the wonderful thing with Kiowa is she's a reasonable person, and it's like, I'm not handling a neighborhood fight through the code enforcement process.
excellent. Thank you, Jack.
So, yeah.
Thanks.
Real quick. So we're moving from like, it looks like 7-inch grass height to 10-inch. I mean, are we under the assumption that if it's already going to get to 7, it's going to get to 10 also? I mean,
We have inconsistency in our code. So one spot it says 7 and one says 16.
Yeah,
16
depending on,
undeveloped, right?
What's that?
yeah,
16 is undeveloped
and
areas.
and adjacent to an occupied, that's pretty much the complaint we get. I have to mow my yard at 7 inches, but the guy right next to me that doesn't have, he has property, he can have his at 16 inches. That doesn't make sense.
Yeah, I still just, I'm
And
just a little
ultimately-
nervous about 10.
That's the recommendation. That doesn't mean that's what the ordinance is going to ultimately say. If you all generally want us to reduce that to something else, we can reduce that too. It cannot below 7 inches by state law.
Does anybody have any recommendations other than what's the staff recommendation?
I think we need clear, consistent. I think this is one of those that staff has done their homework, and I would support their recommendation.
Thank you. You're frozen, by the way.
Am I? Awesome. I thought Chuck was the only one who was frozen.
Chuck, you don't move much.
I'm here. Did you hear me?
Yeah, we just said you don't move much.
Oh, I know.
You're really good at not blinking.
That's good.
And throwing his
You're
voice.
making up for Jack.
Jack's trying to Blair Witch us all. Anyway,
I've got a question on the height. I'm fine with this. I'm with it being consistent no matter where it's at, whether it's private property or commercial. So the example I'm going to use is between us and Clay Creek. And I know I've commented on that before, that that has not been mowed. So if that's a code violation, at what point would the city possibly go in and mow that and either send them a bill, or could you put a lien on their property?
Sure, and we do this fairly regularly. Unfortunately, it's a notice. They get a notice. They have 10 days to rectify that notice. If they don't complete it by state law, we then send them an abatement letter, which says you have 5 more days to get this taken care of, or we will come on, mow it, and put a bill on your special tax lien on your property. We have a service, a local mowing service that we have retained for this purpose. When they come up, they go out and do the mowing. It usually costs in excess of $100, even on small lots, primarily because they're mowing through 10, 12, 16 inches because of the time frame. You know, it's 17 days from the day we first get it reported to the day we can actually send it to a contractor. So grass will grow pretty high. If it's a wet summer, et cetera, we can get it pretty high. But yes, that's how we do it. And we have done it. So I can't tell you off the top of my head how many. There's some regular occurring properties with owners that are somewhat unknown. The original owner passed away, and so we're dealing with those. But when they get bad, we send the notices, do everything we're supposed to, and then we go mail it, and it gets a special tax lien gets sent to the county.
I'll talk to you outside of this on this property up here then.
Okay. Some of that property, just so you know, is city property.
Yeah,
I know
Mr.
some of it
Parks
is, but
Director.
it needs to be addressed. I'll just leave it
Our
at
Parks
that.
Director is on.
Sure.
so-
Yeah, and we have had ongoing communications and concerns with that. And we actually have a discussion with the developer there with regard to the splash pad as well. There are multiple issues there.
Okay. I figured there probably was. Anyway, back to the 10 inches, you know, me personally, let's just go for 7 across the board, but I know that's probably not realistic in commercial when a property's being developed and it's in the construction phase. That probably isn't feasible. So I'll go with the 10 max.
Yeah, 10's pretty tall to start, because we give them a notice, then we send them a letter. So yeah, it's going to be 12, 13, 14 before it actually gets mowed.
So do we go to 7 across the
Well,
board?
I mean, if we're starting point 16 on some of these, then it might be, 20 plus inches by the time we mow.
Right.
I think 10 is where.
And I think that's the compromise.
Yeah, and that's where I think the 10 recommendation, I'm okay with the 10-inch recommendation. As long as we're consistent.
True.
I like us to be consistent, but boy, if my neighbor didn't cut his grass till it got to 9 inches every time, it's going to have a big effect on my property values.
You back up the green space. It's not cut anyway.
I mean, that is a good point, though. I mean,
Yeah.
that is really tall for a residence.
So are we recommending 7 then for consistency?
We can go 7, 8, 9, whatever.
I mean, I still like 7, but I mean, the undeveloped stuff, I mean, maybe that could just be 10. I mean, it's not, I know you want consistency, but I mean, it's still better.
I would probably prefer 7.
Anyone object to 7 across the board?
I like 10, but that's my personal, I think 10 inches when you're trying to let your yard get a little bit of weight to it is okay, but I can see the problem with people that constantly wait till it's 10 inches before they move.
Does anyone strongly object to us making it 7 inches consistent?
I think it'd be easier for enforcement just to know that that's it.
Okay. So Jack, you want to go ahead and write it at 7 and
Sure. And if between now and the first reading on the 20th, there's been public comment or concerns or anything brought up about the matter, it's real easy to amend an ordinance while we're there. So we will draft it at 7 and then we'll go from there.
okay. What about the vehicle parking on yards? Any changes to that?
I don't have any issues with that. I think that sounds reasonable.
Okie dokie. Jack,
Solid
you have everything you
surface.
need then?
Solid surface it is. We can get that drafted. We'll have it ready for the 20th along with the building codes.
Sounds good. It looks like Sarah has joined from the Girl Scout troop. Is everybody there? Are you guys ready to present?
No, we are all going to join individually from our houses. So we have 3 other girls
So do you wanna
that should
give-
be
you guys-
joining us here pretty shortly.
Okay, I'll go ahead and we'll take a quick 10-minute break and hopefully they'll all join in the next 10 minutes. Does that work?
Yeah, thank you.
No problem.